The former chief of the Capitol Police told Tucker Carlson that he was not informed by the deep state that they had their agents in the crowd. Is it possible that the Capitol Police were not informed of the potential threat because that threat was beneficial to the establishment? Let's have a look. Hello there, you 6.5 million awakening wonders. Thanks for joining us on our voyage to truth and freedom. How many indictments, how many investigations must there be till we arrive at the promised land of transparency and clarity? Hit the notification bell and subscribe right now. That way we know our content should reach you. Let us know if you have any problems getting your hands on this content and we'll demand a thorough investigation into it. Not an investigation where you don't call as a witness the former chief of the Capitol Police, perhaps because you don't want to hear his testimony. I'm referring to the conversation between Tucker Carlson and Stephen Sund, the former chief of the Capitol Police, who says that he was not informed that there was a potential threat prior to the events of January 6th. Now, the truth is a complex business. There are many people who believe that deep state agents in the crowd encouraged violence on that day. There are other people that think that the events were entirely as is reported by the mainstream media, and now there's this new emergent idea that there was advance warning that there could be trouble, but sufficient measures were not taken to prevent them, perhaps because it was beneficial to have some disruption and disturbances that day. Do these revelations exonerate Donald Trump? For example, if the deep state knew that there was a threat, didn't inform the Capitol Police and enable the police force to prevent that threat by having sufficient officers on the site on that day, how can Trump be blamed for these events by inciting the violence on that day? How can he? It seems that the deep state are at least partly culpable. There are many different ways we can look at the events on January the 6th, but it does seem to me that there's more to this story than just Donald Trump caused it by encouraging it. Let's have a look at the conversation between Tucker Carlson and Stephen Sund and then come to our own conclusions.
Certainly, federal agencies had intel suggesting this was going to be a bigger than normal protest and could be violent.
Absolutely. Now, when you look back and you see some of the intel that was out there, and I reference a lot of it in the book, there's intel talking about going up and killing the palace guards. Those are my officers. There are intel talking about using chemicals at some of the entry points. There's intel indicating that they've done surveillance on some of the entry points at the Capitol. None of that's been included. They talk about burning down the Supreme Court. They talk about different attacks on different members of Congress. And they talk about storming the building. Not a single word of that is included in any of the intelligence assessments.
It's odd because it contradicts some of the other narratives. If there was advance intel that there was an intention to storm the Capitol and use a variety of weaponry, that does sound a bit more like an insurrection. Some of our reporting is about, no, there was no insurrection. This was a simple protest that was exacerbated by the presence of FBI agents or CIA agents or various other agents that had infiltrated that movement. But this is a different story. He's saying, I wasn't told there was any threat. Otherwise, I would have handled the event differently. That means that the deep state agents like the FBI are somewhat culpable. And I bet you've heard theories about other significant conspiracy theory events in American history where people had advanced information that a certain event was going to happen and didn't do enough to prevent it. That there were operatives for the CIA in certain big historical events. Let me know in the comments if you know what I'm talking about, guys. You conspiracy theorists.
And a matter of fact, my intelligence unit is putting out documents on the 4th, 5th, and 6th indicating a low probability of civil disobedience.
What?
Yeah.
So, if you were, and I'm not, but if you were conspiracy minded, you might think that certain agencies concluded there was likely to be chaos at the Capitol and that served their political purposes, and so they let it happen and they prevented you from stopping it.
What's interesting about Tucker's conclusion, other than the rather beautiful way that he conveys it, is we increasingly believe here at Stay Free that whatever event you're discussing, the pandemic, the Hawaii fires, the indictment of Donald Trump, the events of January 6th, a useful tool is cui bono, who benefits. That doesn't mean that necessarily the event was manufactured, just that there are certain institutions, certain interests, certain groups that benefit from, say, a pandemic. A government is able to regulate more. Big pharma are able to profit more. That doesn't mean they caused it. It just means that society itself appears to set up to advantage certain sets of interests. If indeed the FBI had information that there was likely to be violence and they didn't inform their colleagues over at the Capitol Police Force, hey, there's likely to be violence, so you should prepare for that, why would they not do that? And before we have to check ourselves for being conspiracy theorists, note that Stephen Sund's testimony has not been included in the ongoing inquiry around January January the 6th. Why was his testimony not included? It seems that there is an agenda. It seems that certain events do benefit certain interests. I mean, that's not a conspiracy theory, is it? So this is what we already know about events that day. Dozens of undercover agents and confidential human informants from multiple law enforcement agencies were present. Court documents indicate there were FBI informants in two of the groups that organised the riot, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. The FBI has a long history of using confidential informants to entrap people who otherwise would not have committed a crime. For example, our recent video, a fantastic video, even if I do say so myself, the Newburgh 4 case, where the FBI essentially created some crimes for them to commit, then drove them to the crimes and all but committed the crimes on their behalf, then put them in prison. They've been released on compassionate grounds, but for me, that's not very compassionate. At best, the riot was a massive security failure. At worst, informants may have encouraged rioters to enter the Capitol. So did the FBI encourage events on January the 6th in order to entrap peaceful MAGA protesters? It's very difficult for us to find sponsors over here because, let's face it, we're loose cannons and we're putting forward theories and ideas that are difficult to handle. You can handle the truth. We know that about you. That's why it's important that when we have sponsors and commercial partners, we offer them the best possible advantages. Thank you for staying and watching this message to the end. I've tried my level best to make it funny. Thank you. It's so difficult to get the truth, isn't it? We can't trust these institutions. We can't trust our media. We can't trust big tech. Do you know in our country, the UK, there's been another data breach. 40 million British voters have had their information exposed by hackers, including our names and addresses going back to 2021. Where was I living then? What did I call myself back in those days? These nefarious ne'er-do-wells who spend their time hacking your accounts wide open, often ransom or sell your data to data brokers. And it's these grubby, filthy pigs who then sell on your personal information for serious profit. But you have the right to remove your data from the records of these fat cat data brokers. And that's where our sponsors, Incogni, come riding in to save the day. Incogni reach out to the data brokers and request that your personal data is removed. They have the goal of ensuring that any leaked information they have about you is deleted from the record. And it's automated, so you can just relax, lie back and wait for the rewards. All you've got to do is create an account with Incogni using my code, BRAND, brand, or click on the link in the description. Give Incogni the right to work on your behalf to remove your data from the brokers' databases, then relax. You'll be notified about all the brokers and removed from all the email lists you've been put on. Plus, I've got some better news for you because the first 100 people that go to my link, incogni.com/Brad, will get 60% off. That's quite a lot, isn't it? What better way to fight injustice and corruption? Okay, let's get back to the events of January 6th. After January 6th, while establishment Democrats and commentators called for the many non-violent January 6th participants to be harshly prosecuted, even charged with felony murder, some judges and prosecutors opted for leniency, acknowledging the actions of many of the individual rioters often boiled down to trespassing. I've seen footage of people pushing and smashing stuff. I've also seen footage of people peacefully trespassing. It seems that there was an agenda to frame these events as felony murder rather than trespass. So it makes you wonder if there was some encouragement. At least 2 FBI whistleblowers have been persecuted for concerns over how the January 6th protesters were treated. Stephen Friend that is, expressed concerns about the FBI's use of SWAT teams to arrest January the 6th subjects. Within a month of these disclosures, the FBI removed Friend's security clearance and removed him from active duty. And Garrett O'Boyle disclosed that the FBI pressured him to violate the law by opening domestic violent extremist investigations without sufficient basis. O'Boyle was transferred to a new unit, moved his family across the country and was placed on an unpaid suspension the first day he arrived. Obviously, the whistleblowers' concerns were that there was an overreach by the FBI and almost an intention to treat them as extremists without due process or due evidence. And that's the revelation, essentially, of an agenda. So how does Stephen Sund's testimony, or at least his chat on the internet with Tucker Carlson, put a different inflection on these events? While Sund was begging congressional leaders to greenlight assistance from the National Guard who were within eyesight of the Capitol, by the time the National Guard finally showed up, Sund noted New Jersey State Police had beat them to the Capitol. So, Stephen Sund, in his role of Chief of the Capitol Police, was not given advance intel that there could be a problem. We know that now. He also, when asking for assistance on the scene, was denied it. In fact, the New Jersey Police got there before the law enforcement agencies that he could see on the horizon. People were coming over from Jersey Shore. Some of the Sopranos arrived in advance, and there's Paulie and Christopher getting involved and helping out. So why was that? Who benefits from not dealing with this problem before it gets too bad? A Government Accountability Office report revealed that by January the 3rd, 2021, the FBI was tracking 4 domestic terrorists who planned to attend the riot, Sun said. 3 days later, on the day of the riot, the number of domestic terrorists tracked by the FBI grew to 18 to 19. The actions or lack thereof taken by the government leading up to the riot led Sun to believe that the intelligence officials in power were aware of the attack in advance and covered it up by failing to disseminate the information to those who needed it. So, what's being suggested is that government agencies had advance warning of a threat but ignored it for some reason. Lawmakers didn't want Sun to testify. Why is that? In the aftermath of the Capitol riot, lawmakers began to schedule hearings on the security failures while the fever grew to launch a snap impeachment of the outgoing president. I fought to testify, Sun said, but they didn't want me to testify in the Senate hearing. You would think that the chief of law enforcement of that region, of the Capitol, would be allowed to testify, especially if his testimony was at odds with the preferred narrative. That's what justice looks like. Remember during the pandemic, we can't have any experts who don't agree. What's that then? That's an agenda, at least. It seems that because Sun's testimony would not support the favoured outcome, an immediate snap impeachment of Trump, his testimony was discounted, not even included. That shows there was an agenda. So how can we be sure there isn't an agenda now? Perhaps most importantly of all, if there was an advance warning that there could be violence on that day, how can you continue to blame Donald Trump for inciting the violence if you knew in advance of Trump's speech that there was likely to be violence and didn't inform the Capitol Police? Does this, therefore, break down the grounds for indicting Trump? So, as we continually ask, cui bono? Who benefits from this entire framing of the events of January the 6th? Donald Trump is facing 4 criminal charges relating to attempts to overturn the 2020 election result, with maximum sentences ranging from 5 to 20 years in prison. Well, who would benefit from Donald Trump facing 20 years in prison? The Capitol riot has frequently been compared to the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks. On the one hand, the comparison is absurd. However, the two events do have some stark parallels. Each was an avoidable security failure, received a mountain of fear-inducing media coverage, and has since been used to justify further centralization of repressive government powers. Who benefits? And indeed, there are other comparisons that I'm not able to make on this channel. Have a look at our content on the other place where there are perhaps parallels that are not so explicit, i.e. allowing an event to take place that could have been prevented is sometimes a tactic that advantages the very people that are decrying those events. The response to the events of January the 6th has been marked by a crackdown on dissent, a dramatic increase in anti-protest bills around the country, including at least 88 that have been introduced since the Capitol riot, a massive build-up of the Capitol Police into a national force to target terrorism, as well as the rollout by the Biden administration of a sweeping domestic counter-terror strategy. In many ways, the response to January 6th may wind up being more dangerous than the event itself. So if Steven Sund is telling the truth and he wasn't given vital intel that there could be violent insurrectionists in the crowd, who benefits from that event taking place? Who benefits from the failure to call on-site law enforcement agencies and officers to the site? Who benefits from Donald Trump being in prison from 5 to 20 years? Who benefits from the introduction of a raft of new anti-protest laws? It seems to me that the current administration would benefit, opponents of Donald Trump would benefit, centralist, globalist, corporatist, donor-funded political organizations that do not change no matter who's in power would all benefit. When considering the framing of January the 6th, you have to ask yourself, how has this event been used? What's happened subsequently? What do we know? What information is ignored? What information is amplified? Steven Sund's testimony on Tucker that he was not given the information he needed to properly police the event, and the fact that he was not allowed to testify, clearly points to an agenda, and the potential to impeach and even imprison Donald Trump suggests that the beneficiaries are those that most oppose him. But that's just what I think. Why don't you let me know what you think in the comments in the chat? If you enjoyed this video, have a look at either of these. Remember, we stream a 1-hour-long daily show every day in the other place. There's a link in the description. Join us there when you can. More important than any of that, though, is that you please, if you can, stay free.